As I write this, the important ancient healing plants and fungi found within the family of psychedelics are still considered a Schedule I substance and are the most restricted. These restrictions come with devastating consequences if caught by law enforcement, and possession can ruin an entire person's future. The reason for this is because psychedelics expand human perception and break free the associated stigmas entrained into our psyche. Terence McKenna said, "Psychedelics are illegal not because a loving government is concerned that you may jump out of a third-story window. Psychedelics are illegal because they dissolve opinion structures and culturally laid down models of behavior and information processing. They open you up to the possibility that everything you know is wrong." If you look throughout human history at so many of the brilliant breakthroughs, inventions, and great leaps in our progression, most of them can be attributed to psychedelics. They are our natural allies here to aid us in expansion and in the pursuit of truth. Almost every item listed in the highly restricted Schedule I status is a natural or artificial psychedelic, except for one obvious substance. It would be too conspicuous if not for the feared substance of heroin being present. Heroin, which is derived from opium, is indeed a very dangerous drug. However, what most do not know is that it is virtually the same compound as morphine or Oxycontin, which are frequently prescribed to the public. There are many other opioid-based drugs that are regularly given out by the pharmaceutical industry as part of what we have been made to believe is medicine. How could this have happened to medicine? Medicine's ancient purpose was to make us feel better and become healthy. These days, you can die from simply misreading the instructions on the back of a commonly available over-the-counter medication. Modern medicine has become dangerous, synthetically created compounds peddled by drug-dealing doctors, unaware of their true consequences. When profit became the motive behind medicine, the incentives behind healing people and finding cures became illusions themselves. On a deeper level, the many medications that suppress so much of our consciousness are heavily encouraged through massive profit gains. Planet Earth contains everything humanity needs to heal and grow from within nature itself. Since natural substances cannot be patented, there is little interest from modern medicine in their use. From the ancient cultures still thriving deep in the Amazon rainforest to the spiritual shamans high up in the Himalayan mountains, humans have always had a connection with the natural medicines from the earth. This deviation is a large reason for the continued sickness and suppression of consciousness in society. The giant pharmaceutical companies who are peddling these synthetic-based cures for happiness have been responsible for countless deaths and suffering. We may never know how many have died from these medicines, but one day the truth will be exposed as a black mark for the medical industry. The most effective technique for the suppression of consciousness is achieved through fear. Fear is the most powerful tool for controlling a population and keeping it in a stagnant state of expansion. A human dominated by fear will exist in the lowest vibrational form of consciousness they can. This tactic is achieved by bombarding society with alarming images that frighten us and make us feel like we need protection for our continued survival. The population is groomed into a state of constant stress and fear and driven towards the hatred of other ethnic groups and religions. The most vital concept to realize for the success of expanding consciousness is that fear is not real. It is merely a tool for the control of the public and simply a leftover aspect of our ancient left brain. If you do not feed the negative energy of fear itself, it will not exist within you. Fear amplifies stress and locks our consciousness in a left brain mentality for survival. Through the use of fear, humans make non-rational decisions and are easily led down a path of violence. No other method of control in all of human history has led to such profoundly negative consequences to our own expansion and advancement. Humanity must take a hard look at these precise events leading up to each major human conflict that escalated into a large-scale war. From the First World War to Vietnam, all of these conflicts were carefully created with humanity being used as nothing more than the conduits of violence for tyrant leaders. With the orchestrated sinking of the Lusitania by its own country, the First World War was romanced by society as a heroic and brave act, with little consideration of the true reality. Droves of young men quickly joined the fight, leaving their families behind in the name of nationalism. Confidently rushing into combat, the romantic illusion of their sacrifice was only made clear to them after thousands came home in coffins. The most important question we have to ask ourselves is, did so many innocent people have to die at all? The propaganda and fear that has severely influenced society for so long has convinced the public that these acts of violence are necessary and needed. This despicable treatment of humanity will echo on in our memories and will someday be viewed by a future society with embarrassment and heavy sadness. How many millions of people had to die for the lust of the military-industrial complex, or the massive wealth gains from the elite controlling families? Perpetual warfare has become the dominant feature for much of the Middle Eastern countries, as well as large portions of the African continent. This ancient region of the world has been the target of hate and instability for thousands of years. Even if a nation is not fighting a war on their own soil, they are likely taking part in supporting these deadly conflicts that continue to ravage the lives of millions of people who live there. By scapegoating the Middle East region, specifically the Muslim people, a seemingly credible outside attacker was created. This alleged attacker, hailing from this war-torn region, was portrayed as hiding in caves and possessing the ability for advanced bomb-making and elaborate attacks across the world. The media uses propaganda to further spread fear and give the illusion that radical jihadists could be hiding anywhere and strike at any time. The orchestration for the high-level acts of created terrorism on society, most famously September 11, 2001, are what are known as false flag attacks. These acts of violence carried out in a very public setting are designed to create fear, hate, and patriotic support for the military-industrial complex. All one has to do is look into Operation Northwoods, where the United States practiced drills hijacking commercial planes in order to blame other countries as a means to start a war. Many of the true motives behind going to war are kept secret from the public and are never disclosed. The commonly used tactic by the United States is to create a grand spectacle which is perpetrated in full view of the public by the use of bombs or a mass shooting. After the event occurs, the public will cry out for immediate action to be taken, being driven by overwhelming media coverage that promotes fear and nationalism without asking the needed questions to get to the real truth of the matter. While searching for evidence in the aftermath, the authorities will miraculously find an unscathed pair of passports which perfectly identify the apparent terrorist. Certain familiarities will immediately reoccur after each event, from the need to increase military spending and support to an attempt at banning all guns from the public. The controlled mass media uses these events to portray a state of complete anarchy across the world. This clever maneuver is part of the ancient agenda for establishing a military-run society where all of our remaining freedoms are removed. The implications for this coerced outcome for the future would envision a modern Nazi state under a single world government and has the uncanny appearance of something right out of the book 1984. The promotion of instability across the Middle East and other parts of the world, leading to so many devastating conflicts, is the primary tactic used by the powerful military-industrial complex to sustain their continued funding and purpose. In his last speech before leaving office as president, Dwight D. Eisenhower warned the American people and the world of the dangers of the military-industrial complex and the control it can have on all of society. When we contemplate on all the things a president prefers to say when they are leaving office, this should stand as a stark reminder to emphasize the seriousness and truth behind this information. President Eisenhower's final address to the nation included these chilling words, quote, "In the councils of government, We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist. We must never let the weight of this combination endanger our liberties or democratic process. Only an alert and knowledgeable citizenry can compel the proper meshing of the huge industrial and military machinery of defense with our peaceful methods and goals, so that security and liberty may prosper together." End quote. Humanity has been warned repeatedly by past leaders and presidents, some of whom have even lost their lives over revealing some of this important information. But time and time again, we refuse to see the truth and instead prefer to remain within our own ignorance. War is a means of instability, profit, and total control of a population. I find it fascinating that we call extreme policies that are seemingly inhumane draconian policies, considering the root of the word. It can be easy to let this information depress and anger you, but we must simply realize the past and then let go of its fear-based grip over us. Always remember that knowledge is power. It can be very difficult to comprehend so much of this shocking information and believe that it is in fact real. I can assure you that the only purpose for the release of this information is to protect truth. The most important commodity to humanity is time itself. All of these tactics used to suppress consciousness are simply a delaying of the inevitable awakening and disclosure that will come. By connecting all of this information together, an elaborate framework begins to emerge showing the sheer scope and magnitude of this overall suppression of consciousness. Behind this dark shadow, we see that the purpose all along was to prevent our realization of who we really are and the gifts locked within our non-coding or junk DNA. The most important question we must always ask first is why. The why is what always leads to truth. As the system begins to flounder and desperately throws all it has at the human race, we must put its negative influences of fear behind us and only look towards the future. In many ways, humanity is like a flock of sheep being led by a farmer with a carrot. We are not forced to live in the farm, but instead choose to. The realizations of truth behind this human farm that we have been living in for so long can shatter a person's reality and change their life forever. That is why once you fully understand this information and become consciously aware of truth, you will join the ranks of all of those individuals who proudly proclaim they are awake. By understanding these fundamental truths to reality, it will be like opening your eyes from what seemed like an endless nightmare. And that is the end of chapter 3. Peace and blessings to you all.